Ladies and gentlemen, that's a profile of our very, very distinguished speakers this evening. Now, each speaker will speak for about 15 minutes. Thereafter, we'll go to the Q&A. I will now request Dr. Narayan to please share your insight. Dr. Narayan.
Thank you very much, Group Captain, Mr. Satyamurthy, Mr. Lakshminarayan, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this discussion. And what you have chosen is a fairly complex subject and very much looking at the Hindu elephant from different points of view. I'm sure that there are different views on what exactly is happening in the economy. Firstly, let us look at the question: where is the money coming from? In the sense that obviously everybody agrees that there is a boom in expenditure, in spending, in growth. Something is happening, which was not happening 5 or 10 years ago. So, if you just look at the numbers, consumption spending in 2023 was 2.15 trillion US dollars as compared to 2019, which was only 1.7 trillion US dollars, which means there's an increase, huge increase of nearly 25-30% in consumption spending, which has happened just over these 4 years. We don't have 2025 figures, but even if you look at 2023, this is the kind of increase that is happening. Further, if you look at household debt has gone up from 26% of the GDP to 48.6% of GDP, of which 55% is non-housing retail loan, which means people are borrowing. People are borrowing retail. People are borrowing non-housing, which means they are borrowing for their credit cards, they are borrowing for consumption expenditure, for travel, etc. So there is a boom in spending that is happening, and the spending at the first level is happening through debt, through consumer debt. Now, the consumer debt, how it will play out in the hands of the lender and how the lender will secure, because a lot of it, credit card debt and all, is mostly unsecured debt. So how it will play out in the hands of the lender is something we'll have to see. But the hope of the people who are borrowing is that they would be able to meet their debt obligations arising out of their future earnings and their growth in earnings and their growth in wealth. But I'm setting this context to say, yes, people are spending more, people are having more, therefore people are having more money to spend. Three other sources which were briefly mentioned for in the introduction is also very, very obvious to all of us. One, of course, is that land prices. Land prices are going up all over urban cities and over tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And anybody having land is able to monetize it much faster now, and therefore a lot of liquidity is coming into the hands of people who are holding even small parcels of land, whether they are holding it for 5 years or 10 years. A doubling of land prices in 5 years is quite common in urban cities. And this immediately gives rise, land monetization immediately gets rise to a substantial increase in the cash economy, because as all of us are aware, land transactions substantially involve a lot of cash. And this cash economy, once it is converted into cash, the cash naturally goes into, I would say, non-identifiable investments, mostly into gold and jewelry and silver and maybe further real estate, additional real estate. So this multiplication is happening, and is happening significantly in the last 5 years. If you look at central areas, Chennai, where I live, and I live in partly in Coimbatore, I have seen doubling of land prices happening over the last 5 or 6 years. If a doubling of land prices and conversion and more urbanization is pushing agriculture land into urban construction hands, because it is much more economical for the seller to convert his land into cash at the higher rate rather than to continue to grow crops. So therefore, there is a huge real estate money which is also coming into the system here, and that is also coming partly into the banks and substantially into cash as well. But at the back of all this, why is it happening? Why are people buying? How is it people are able to buy in central Chennai properties worth 6 crores, 7 crores for an apartment? In cities like Coimbatore, 2 crores, 3 crores for apartment. I mean, how is it happening? So one, I said it is also consumer spending is happening through household debt. That is one part of it. But substantially, there is some kind of a saving or some kind of a stock of money which is available, which is now freely available to be spent. So a person who sells a property, a land, usually goes in for an apartment. So that money is reused in that apartment. And definitely at the apartment prices keep going up because he has secured something like an unexpected gain out of the property that he is having. All this is happening primarily because of, I would say, two or three factors. One is overall the economy is growing substantially. If I look at the overall size of the national budget, the revenue the revenue budget or the total revenue receipts, which were about 19.62 lakh crores in 2019-20, are 34 lakh crores now. And if you look at the total expenditure of the national budget, it used to be 27.86 lakhs crores in 2019-20. It's 50 lakh crores now. And that is an increase of close to 60 to 70%. Remember, this is all in nominal terms because we are spending today's cash. The real term number comes only for economists and only for calculations, but everybody is spending today's cash. Today you go and buy rice, you are paying 70 rupees. 5 years back, maybe you are paying 40 rupees. But okay, look at today's cash. Today's cash, you have 70 rupees to buy that same quantity of rice. And if you look at GDP, the other way is that if you look at GDP per capita, again we have very interesting numbers that in 1990, just about 30 years ago, our GDP per capita was $371 at those dollar conversion prices. Today, at much higher dollar conversion prices, our GDP per capita in 2024 was 2,700. No, 2,700 is not joke. And if we are staying and we are getting pulled down by some of the states like Bihar and West Bengal. But if you look at Tamil Nadu, it's substantially higher, 1.4 times, 1.5 times higher than 2,700. We are close to $3,000 to $4,000 per capita income. The other development which has happened, which again is very visible, and this development that has happened is that we have had very good agriculture crops in the last 2 or 3 years. The 3 years have been very good for agriculture. So there are huge agriculture surpluses. Actually, the problems of the agriculture agitation in Punjab and currently the problems being faced in Tamil Nadu by farmers growing much more than what the government can buy is because the agriculture surplus have been substantial. And there is also, in addition, there is also huge diversification in agriculture into cash crops, into vegetables, into fruits, into flowers. Therefore, much more money is coming into the agriculture hand. And the most interesting thing is, this is all cash. This is all untaxed cash. We have a wonderful system which is built into the constitution that agriculture income cannot be taxed unless it is done by the states. So which means that if you are growing 340 million tons of food grains every year, that is equal to that much of, if you even take 1,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees per kilogram, that much of cash is being generated out of the ground, out of the bhumi, every 4 or 5 months. And this cash has to have expenditure. And because the living expenditure, the actual cost of living, has not gone up to that particular extent, therefore the surplus is available for distribution. And particularly when many states are giving a lot of freebies, free food, free rations, free school textbooks, free school meals, free bus rides, etc. That means the cash available even in the tier 2, tier 3 cities, as my friend Mr. Lakshmanan will bear out, the cash available is quite substantial. And this is easily visible in a city like Chennai, where if you start visiting even whether it's a small restaurant or a big five-star hotel, you see full. If you go to a temple, temples are full. The donations which are pouring into temples are reaching record levels. So this is a multiplication factor happening out of a liquidity coming out of land, liquidity coming out of increased per capita incomes, liquidity coming out of debt, and liquidity also coming out finally from the market. The stock market have also been performed extremely well, and very ordinary people who had never think of venturing into the stock market are now ready. Youngsters, particularly the age of 25 to 35, 40, are willing to go invest into the stock market and to see returns. Unfortunately, they are not very wise. So there have been a lot of losses that people have suffered who have gone into crypto, etc. But the courage with which people are entering the stock market is quite amazing. And if you look at the more cautious people who are going into mutual funds and systematic investments, I mean, close to 1.5 lakh crores of rupees are being connected every year. That means whenever the foreign investors are pulling out, the Indian investors are stepping in, which are keeping the markets high. So where is it going forward? I think where is it going? It's going forward because somebody did mention the inflation. Going forward is that if this rapidity, and let's not forget that in real terms we are growing at something like 6.5, 7%. In nominal terms we are growing at 12 to 13%, and that is the amount of goods that are going to be consumed every year in addition. So what is happening is that our manufacturing market, and manufacturing, I don't mean engines and steel and alone. I mean even the consumption manufacturing market. People who are doing FMCGs, people who are doing even two-wheelers, I'll call that a consumption good now, are not increasing as rapidly as the demand is increasing. And their reason is that a lot of, you see, in India is very peculiar that the family held firms constitute something like 50-52% of the stock exchange, of the stock market. And for a family held concern, it is the target is to maximize wealth for the family rather than to produce so much more goods to internationalize, because he is much more family oriented. You can see a lot of companies in India, a truly I would say shareholder head conglomerate in India on a large scale, in Tamil Nadu particularly on a large scale, does not exist. Therefore, the conservative investment patterns that the conglomerates are following is contributing to some stresses in the economy in terms of goods available to be purchased, and which is why you are also seeing a pressure on inflation and pressure on prices. If only we were a truly market-oriented economy, we would have much more competition coming into these areas, and we would have much more alternative goods available for purchase. My final thought here, I'm a little running out of time here, my final thought here is the benign oil prices that we are seeing, particularly since January. when oil prices have been fairly steady, which means our expenditure on oil as a percentage of the total GDP remains steady even though the GDP is growing very fast. Not steady, it's actually dropping. So the current accounts deficit is actually not I mean, the oil price is no longer a big concern for the current account deficit. Then this is very interesting because that means that money is available. Let us say if there are 2 lakh students going abroad, each costing half a crore to send out a child overseas to study, that money is coming out of private individual savings, not out of government expenditure. So the government money which is being spent for oil is actually quite steady over the last few years, and now the current prices are benign and likely to be benign for quite some time. So I will end. It's a bit, what I have said is a bit fragmented, but in a way these are the thoughts which are uppermost in my mind, and I'll be happy to take any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Narayan. Great insights. Now we'll move on to Professor Dr. Arun Kumar. Can I have his PPT loaded so that he can start? Dr. Arun Kumar. Professor Arun Kumar, you're there. You're able to hear me? Professor Arun Kumar, can I load your PPT? Able to hear me, sir? One more minute, sir. I'll try. You'll join us. Otherwise, we'll move to Shyam.
His name is on the screen.
Yes.
He is appeared.
Yeah. Good evening, sir. Good evening. You're coming a different name, actually. I was looking at Arun Kumar, the another name which is got. Professor, can I share the screen? You have to unmute yourself, Professor. Shankar, can I share Professor's PPT, please, onto the screen? I would like to share it yourself, so we can give screen share. Fine.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir. Clear.
Okay.
Fine, sir. Fine.
So, can you move the PPT?
You say next, then he'll move us. Yes.
Okay. So, as a preliminary, we should be talking about incomes and not money, because money is a small part of the wealth. Okay. All assets are a portfolio of assets with money as only one component of it. Okay. So, what I think somehow it's disappearing. Okay. Now, in a feudal society, growth is not that important, but in a gapless society, it is all about growth. So inequality is less important in the feudal society than in a capitalist society. Capitalist society is driven by profits, and they are generated through more and more output. So higher growth leads to higher profits. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah. So as an introduction, growing inequality checks growth by curtailing demand. And also, such a growth becomes unstable because there's a lack of coordination between investors. And that's why, a capitalist economy goes through cycles and the average growth rate therefore declines. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we are talking about the middle class, which is supposed to be the consuming class. But the question is, how do we define this middle class? Indian middle class is not like a European or a US middle class. Those middle classes are able to spend very freely. They have a high income, they don't take their equipment for repairs. We take our equipment for repair, etc. But the point is that even if we define the Indian middle class in terms of those who are able to consume, it is very small. So even by Indian standards, our middle class is not very large. As we know, 94% of our workers are in the unorganized sector. And I'll come back to this question. They earn very little. So what is the middle class? Maybe only a few percentage of the population. Okay. And those who are substantial spenders, they may be around 3% of the population, and they have substantial black incomes to spend. So roughly about 3% are those who are spenders, who can spend quite freely. 5% may be middle class, who are not that free in terms of spending. And the remaining 93, 94% are basically those who don't spend that much, in the economy. So even this 3% is quite significant, but because of the 1.145 crore people, we have 4.5 crore people, which is like a good size European economy. So in the midst of a lot of poverty, about 140 crore people who are, below the middle class, there are only 4.5 crore who are the spenders, but they are also quite significant. Next slide, please. So why is this happening? It is because India, by world standard, is a low per capita income. Our per capita income is around $2,800, whereas the US has $88,000, Germany has $55,000, and Japan has $33,000. And why I don't go for PPP terms? The PPP terms is actually a double whammy for the poor. Why is the rupee valued higher in PPP terms is because the poor people give cheap services, but they don't consume those goods. Like, for instance, a hamburger. A poor person will not consume a hamburger, whereas hamburger is cheap in India because the poor people charge very low salaries. Similarly for other services that the middle class and the upper classes consume, they are cheap because of the cheap labor that is available here. But the cheap laborer doesn't have servants and so on, right? So in other words, I always compare in nominal dollars rather than in PPP dollars. So therefore, this comparison above of India with $2,800, US with $88,000 is in nominal dollars. So India's market size becomes large because of the large population. It's not because the per capita income is very high or the purchasing power of the individual is very high. And that's why India is at the 140th position globally in per capita terms. So India's comes quite low. So its market size is not very large because of the population. It is just not because of the per capita income, but because of the population. Next slide, please. Okay. So the key problem is that India has a huge divide between the unorganized sector and the organized sector. And unfortunately, the unorganized sector has been declining, especially after demonetization, because demonetization hit the unorganized sector. Then the GST, which is structurally faulty, hit the unorganized sector. Next year after that, in 2018, the NBFC crisis hit it. And then the pandemic hit it very hard. So the unorganized sector in India has been declining, whereas the organized sector is what is rising. But unfortunately, our GDP is calculated on the basis of the organized sector. So if you look at the 2017 method by which GDP is calculated, then you find that of the 39 subsectors of the unorganized sector, 29 are measured using the organized sector data. In other words, the unorganized sector proxies for the unorganized sector in a very large extent. So a declining sector is proxied by a rising sector. And that's why I've been arguing that the GDP is overestimated. So between 2016 and 2014, there were 4 big shocks, as I mentioned. And because they affected the unorganized sector more than the organized sector, therefore, and they haven't recovered. Therefore, our problem is that the Indian economy has been growing at an average of around 2% since 2016, not 7%. And one example of that is the demonetization year. The demonetization year officially grew at 8% and more. Whereas everybody knows that in the month of November, December, January, February, March 2016-17, the economy was down. Markets were shut. The fruits and vegetables could not come to the mandis and so on. So actually, the economy had declined rather than grow at 8%, but officially we said 8%. Also, in the measurement, we project from the previous year to the next year. But when we are projecting from the pre-shock year to the shock year, then we are overestimating the economy. So if the economy is growing at 2%, not 7%, that our GDP is overestimated by about 50%. But then the international agencies are also saying that the Indian economy is growing at 6.5%, 7%. But international agencies are not data collecting agencies. They take the government data and then they present that data with minor modifications. So the error in the official data is also the error in the international agencies' data. Next slide, please. So the point is that the stock markets are growing very rapidly, but only about 6,000 corporates are represented there. The 6 lakh small and medium units are not there. The 7 crore micro units are not there. 11 crore farmers are not there. So in other words, the stock market boom is only reflecting the organized sector boom, but doesn't mean that it's reflecting the small and medium units and the micro units growth or the farmers growth. And where do we get the alternate data for the unorganized sector? The government was forced to set up the e-Shram portal. And on the e-Shram portal, what happened was that Prime Minister himself said a year back that 300 million unorganized sector workers have registered. And now that number would be probably even higher. And initially, what was shown on the e-Shram portal was that 90% workers were saying they are earning less than 10,000 rupees per month. In effect, they were close to the poverty line and they hardly have any savings. The second evidence is that 2 years back in the August 15th speech of the Prime Minister from the ramparts of the Red Fort, he said that effective income taxpayers are only 15 million out of a population of 1.45 billion. That means effectively 1.1% have high incomes on which they are paying the tax. And now this number may be even less because our exemption limit has been raised to 12 lakhs of rupees. But even if it is roughly the same, it means only 1.1% Indians have high enough incomes to be effective income taxpayers. So even though the number of return filers and TDS payers has risen to 9.5 crores, but effectively because of the high exemption limit, roughly about 6 crore go out of the net. And remaining 3.5 crores also effectively only 1.5 crore are paying effective income tax. The remaining about 1.5 crore pay very little tax because they show a very small income. So in other words, the base on which savings are made is very small in the Indian economy. Next slide, please. So who are the savers? As I'm trying to show from this data on the income tax and on the unorganized sector, the number of savers is very small in India. These are those with high incomes, which is, I would say, roughly 3% of the population, and another 5% maybe from the middle classes and so on. These are the people who actually save and who have the money to invest in the economy. So as income inequality increases, savings will rise and tax collection will also grow, because when income inequality rises, it means that those who have higher incomes, their income is going up more. And if their income is going up more and they are saving, the savings will rise. And because their income is going up, so tax collection will also be rising. So the rise in the savings propensity in the economy and the tax collection is because of the rising income inequality, not because many more people are able to save. But then what happens? When this income inequality rises, then demand slackens because those at the bottom are not able to demand, the basic goods of the economy. So when that demand slackens, capacity utilization goes down. And RBI's Obicus data shows that for the organized sector, capacity utilization has been hovering between 70 and 75%. Now, when capacity utilization is between 70 and 75%, you would not invest more. You would begin to invest more when the capacity utilization goes to 85%. And therefore, what has been happening is that the private investment in India has not been very buoyant. And when private investment is not buoyant, then the organized sector itself begins to slow down. The government is complaining that we are boosting the public investment. Last 3 years, the public investment has gone up very substantially. But the public investment is only 25% of the total investment. 75 share comes from the private investment. So unless the private investment begins to go up, the overall investment will not go up. And when the whole growth depends on the investment rate and the investment rate begins to go down, then the growth becomes unstable. So it goes through ups and downs and rather than a steady growth pattern. So in other words, we have to see how the private investment can rise. That is when we can say that the growth will be stabilized in the economy. Next slide, please. So in other words, we can say that India cannot become a rich country by 2047 at the present rate of growth. and the short term is damaging the long term. Because when the unorganized sector declines, and that has 94% of the employment, then the decline in the unorganized sector will lead to high unemployment. And India is characterized more by disguised unemployment, underemployment, and those who've given up looking for work. So our labor force participation rate, which is hovering between, if you look at the ILO data and CMI data, it's around 45, 48%. If you look at the government data, it's around 55, 58%, but much less than the labor force participation rate in other big economies like Brazil, China, and the US. So there's a large amount of unemployment of 3 or 4 different kinds, which is not measured in our unemployment data. So unemployment is much larger. And now what's happening is that with the coming in of the artificial intelligence, this might rise further. This rise in the use of artificial intelligence, while it's good for different sectors, it will also displace mental labor. Till now, whenever technical change used to take place, it was physical labor that was displaced. So on the farm, instead of using bullock, you use tractor, and it can do what work was being done earlier in 3 days, in 3 hours. If you cut the crop, you're using harvester combine as compared to cutting by hand. So that was physical labor being displaced. Or in the factories, robots have come and they're displacing physical labor. But now mental labor, so work of doctors, chartered accountant, lawyers, etc., is going to be displaced. Already coding work, quite a lot is being done, or even research like M-fold can, analyze the fold of proteins, of lakhs of proteins very quickly, whereas earlier for one protein, one PhD used to be done. So in other words, there's speeding up and displacement of scientists and others also happening. So what this is leading is to a new form of capitalism. This new form of capitalism is something that we'll have to grapple with, because it will keep on displacing more and more people from work. So how will savings get generated? And especially if the white collar workers start getting displaced, then these are the savers. And when their savings go down, then it'll have a lot of problem. So all this will lead to, in my judgment, political and social instability, and that will impact the investment climate of the economy. Next slide, please. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Great insight with a lot of data. I know the chartered account hearing this thing must be really, really jittery. What is going to happen to that job? Now I request Shyam. Shyam is laughing. So he's also in the same thing. Over to you, Shyam. We would like to hear your insights on that.
Thank you, Professor. I think after listening to both our illustrious speakers, it's a little difficult to follow Professor Arun Kumar, because I think he has given a very very dark picture of what lies ahead. But frankly, I think that going to your topic, where's the money coming from? The money is primarily coming from the structural changes which the government has done in taxation. We had corporate tax cuts first, then followed by personal income tax cuts, followed by GST reduction. So these 3 things are definitely helping the economy significantly. While we can debate as to how long this will sustain, and whether these measures are more like stopgap measures which will just prop up a slowing economy, or they can accelerate an economy from where it is today, that remains to be seen. But as things stand, I think that these 3 measures have worked on the ground to ensure that the economy continues to grow at a reasonable rate. And also there is one point which is very, very important and not much noticed. In the last 1 year, while urban consumption has been under stress, rural consumption has definitely supported the economy. So if you see the kind of rural consumption in various products like tractors, like SUVs, like two-wheelers, and various consumer products, and then management commentary of so many companies, it's clear that money is coming from the rural economy. So it is not supporting the view that there is going to be some very dangerous thing that will happen in the rural economy in the near future. So I think that rural consumption is happening, and it is supporting the economy significantly. And after a long time, the rural economy has been the big support to various industries which have been dealing with consumption. And today the hope is that with all these changes in personal income tax, in GST, and the upcoming pay commission, urban consumption will also, come back slowly. So broadly, money is coming from the government. Government is putting more money in the hands of the citizen, and citizens are consuming. It's very clear. The second thing is that while citizens are consuming, they also have had a tremendous wealth effect because of the boom in the other asset classes. Today, gold prices are at an all-time high, almost very close to it. You have real estate prices also, which are very close to an all-time high nationally in different parts of our country. And people are able to liquidate properties, as Professor Narayan very aptly pointed out. And all this is putting a lot of money in the hands of people, which they are spending, investing, and also, putting to better use. I think capital is being put to better use by those who are coming into money. And that money is what is, supporting the economy today. Normally, if you have a year like 2026, where the FIs have pounded the Indian market by selling incessantly, you would see the stock market at lows. Instead, you're seeing it within 300 points of its all-time high, which was made last in September of 2024. So 1 year later, despite nearly 14 months of non-stop incessant selling by the FIs, the market has sustained itself. The reason is that the domestic investor has enough liquidity to invest in the economy. And in fact, the domestic investor has invested with far more confidence than the corporate. That's the very interesting aspect, which I think I will agree with both our speakers, that the corporate investment has not kept pace. But the domestic investor has certainly done very well. In fact, if you see the AUM of the Indian mutual fund industry, it has gone to nearly 80 lakh crores. It's the highest in history. Last month, it has grown from 75.61 lakh to 80 lakh crores. If you look at the SIP book, the money put by the middle class largely every month into the stock market, it is now at 29,529 crores in the month of October. And it has been steadily rising from the lows of COVID. So we've had nearly 5 years of SIP book building. If you see the number of accounts that have contributed this money to the SIP, it is 9.45 crore accounts. I mean, that's a very big number. And the total number of people who are, investing in India through the SIP route is 9.88 crores, which is nearly 10 crores. And it's a growing number. The number is continuously growing. So domestic flows into the capital market clearly show that the money put by government in various forms. I gave 3 or 4 ways in which the government has put more money in the hands of people. But there are other things like, doles, subsidies, state governments putting money in the hands, various welfare schemes, which have now made expenditures redundant. Like if somebody was, if a lady was going by a bus and was buying a bus pass, that money is free. Likewise, so many things are being given to people. And that money, again, is available for them. And that is all finding its way into the economy in the form of investments, in the form of consumption. And it's very visible, and you can see it. And these are things which, have definitely supported the economy and the stock market significantly in the recent years. I think Professor Arun Kumar spoke about, the shift from the unorganized to the organized, and how, it can affect the economy. I think this shift is only going to gain momentum. It's not going to slow down. Multiple industries are going to get organized. When these industries get organized, they are going to create scale in the activities that they perform. The activities are very much going to continue being performed. So it's not as if because there's a shift from unorganized to organized, a particular product or a service is not going to be rendered. It is going to be rendered by a much more efficient entity. I think all this is leading to scale. It's leading to other economic opportunities, including employment. So I would not worry about employment being lost because of a shift between unorganized to organized. I think this shift may actually do a lot of good to people because this formalization is leading to financialization of the people who are being employed by the organized sector. And a lot of these jobs are actually in the form of gig jobs. Though the sector is organized, the jobs are not permanent. So they're in the nature of gig jobs. And despite being gig jobs, I think that people are developing financial history, which is again giving them access to credit. Yes, the credit in the economy, the amount of indebtedness is going up. But people seem to be comfortable with it. And as long as the stress doesn't, affect them and they're able to manage, I think that people will continue to consume as much as their capacity permits. So overall, it looks like the consumption-led economic growth is broadly here to stay. We will see fluctuations here and there, but I think the growth is here to stay. And the government has proactively done quite a few things, starting from the corporate tax cut, which it did a few years ago, to the personal income tax cut, which it did in the last budget, to the GST cuts, which have happened in the month of September, October. I think the government has been very proactive in many areas, and it has put a lot of money in the hands of people, and that money in turn is being invested. It's being used for consumption. It's being used in different ways as people want to, utilize it. And this utilization is definitely leading to a lot of new trends in consumption, in lifestyle, and that in turn is leading to a lot of social change in how people want to see their future and see their present and what they want to do with money and how they want to go out and earn more money so that they can live a better life. So I think that there is an aspirational class which is now growing fastest than ever before. And it remains to be seen how this aspirational class is going to contribute further to the economic growth, and by virtue of contributing to the economic growth and productivity, how this aspirational class is going to consume more in the future or continue consuming as they do in the present long into the future. That is something that we'll have to see, but I personally am quite optimistic. I think with the level of financialization that has happened already and the rate of financialization that is going to happen in the future, I think that Indians are going to come into a lot more money in the future than we have in the recent